Bien. Monsieur le Président, cher Volodymyr, Monsieur le Chancelier, cher Friedrich, Monsieur le Premier ministre, cher Keir, Messieurs les envoyés spéciaux, cher Steve, cher Jared, merci beaucoup pour votre présence aujourd'hui avec nous, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs en vos grades et qualités. Nous avons aujourd'hui tenu à Paris une nouvelle réunion des chefs d'État et de gouvernement des 35 pays qui composent la coalition des volontaires, aux côtés du président Zelenskiy et en présence d'une délégation américaine conduite par messieurs Witkoff et Kushner. C'est la 15e réunion.
This is the 15th meeting of the coalition of the willing that we've had since the 17th February of last year. We have with us 28 heads of state and government, the Secretary General of NATO, and the President of the European Commission, and the President of the European Council. But today, we've made considerable progress, as reflected in the Paris Declaration, providing strong guarantees for lasting peace. This declaration of the Coalition of the Willing, for the first time, recognizes operational convergence between the 35 countries making up the Coalition of the Willing, Ukraine and the United States of America. We're talking about strong security guarantees. This declaration sets out each of the components of this security guarantee. We have a report from our heads of general staff and also from the side of the Euro-American coordination. And here we have taken due note of the fact that there is a coordination body that will fully coordinate all the competent armed forces and provide coordination between the Coalition of the Willing, United States of America and Ukraine in operational terms that will support the General Staff of the Coalition here in Paris. Within this coalition, on the basis of all the work done in recent months, we have consolidated our approaches. Firstly, with the setting up ceasefire monitoring mechanisms to be placed under American leadership, with contributions from several states that said they were willing and able to do so. Then long-term support, firstly to Ukrainian armed forces that are and will remain in the front line of defense and deterrence against aggression. So we will have on a volunteer basis 800,000 men with training capabilities and all the necessary resources to ensure that this army can deter any new aggression. Then we'll continue to lay the ground for the creation of a multinational force in the air, on the seas and on land to provide reassurance after the ceasefire and a long way behind the contact line that was agreed between all the general staff from France to Germany and Poland. I would also like to salute the work done and offered by Turkey in maritime theatre. They are willing to take on responsibilities. And fourthly, we have decided to translate into legal terms these commitments to support Ukraine in the event of a new attack by Russia through solidarity and intervention mechanisms. And also, we are continuing to converge around the questions of economic support and corruption. That's the second thing we talked about. But at the same time, we have consolidated the architecture, the planning, the means and the rules for the security guarantee for Ukraine the day after peace is signed, both for Ukraine and the continent of Europe. Part of our discussion was then focusing on Ukraine's future prosperity with the American plan that was presented and the European contributions with a desire to speed up our work alongside Ukraine so that in the next few weeks this prosperity plan can be finalized. It will be a major component of the peace agreements. All of this constitute essential pillars of what will support the negotiations that are underway and we want, therefore, that to be completed as soon as possible. But these security guarantees are the key to ensuring that never a peace agreement can mean Ukrainian surrender, and never a peace agreement can mean a new threat for Ukraine. And I think what's very important to underscore is all the countries represented here, but also all the countries in the coalition of the willing, and those who attended this meeting following the excellent coordination that we had last year in Berlin. All those actors share the same desire for peace in Ukraine and Europe, but we insisted that this be a fair, lasting and strong peace. And we're all clear in our minds that the peace agreements signed by Russia in the last 15 years have all been broken in Moldova, Georgia and Ukraine. Therefore, based on that experience, we want to have peace and guarantees of peace on the basis of Europe's experience of the last 15 years. This is why the Paris Declaration includes these guarantees and notes the convergence between coalition of the willing, Ukraine and the United States of America. In addition to all this, in the short term, we will continue to provide our support to Ukraine to cope with all the challenges it is facing at the moment in terms of protecting its airspace, protecting civilians who are continually targeted, even as we speak, by the Russians. And we will also continue our work on sanctions to limit and reduce Russia's war effort. So that is what I have to report, thanking my colleagues in Europe and the United States for the progress that has been possible thanks to today's meeting. I'll now hand over to President Zelenskiy.
Thank you, dear Emmanuel, for your invitation. I would like to thank Chancellor, Prime Minister, as well as the American representatives and all the journalists present. First of all, I would like to thank you for this meeting, which is the most representative. 27 leaders of the European Union, NATO, Australia, New Zealand, Turkey. As a matter of fact, it is a very broad representation, and we are able to sign a document. This is very concrete. There is a declaration, a joint declaration, and there's also this declaration of intent signed by our three countries. And this illustrates the willingness of the coalition and the European countries to work for peace. And we want to be ready so that when diplomacy reaches peace, we can place the forces of the coalition of the willing. The details will be set out in other documents. We're working on which countries are willing to contribute and guarantee security in the air, at sea and on land. We are assessing which forces are necessary, who will be able to who shall coordinate all of that. And we also want to work on monitoring and clearly say how this force or that force will be financed, as well as the Ukrainian army. I believe that our Ukrainian forces will be based on the Ukrainian army with other elements. The military from France, the United Kingdom, and others have worked on the necessary military equipment. We also have, we already have enough details, and we know which countries will get involved and what each of them will contribute separately. And allow me to thank every leader who is willing to contribute to this peaceful solution. We also addressed, we had very concrete discussions with the American delegation regarding the monitoring of peace. It's very important for us. What is crucial in this peace deal is anything that can prevent a new Russian aggression. We also made progress with the American representatives who worked on documents in Paris, and we will have other meetings with Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner. We are working on some bilateral agreements, bilateral documents as well as trilateral documents, and are hoping to sign these soon in different formats. And God willing, we will succeed. We are very grateful for the support of the United States of America, and so that they can provide the necessary support so that Russia cannot aggress Ukraine once again. And we very much agree upon the fact that the guarantees must be based on some legal grounds to be confirmed by the American Congress. Of course, some issues remain open regarding these documents, including the 20-point document. And what we really need to work upon is the issue of territory. We have a number of ideas that could be helpful. And if some issues are not remain blocked between our teams, and the leaders can also get involved. There will be other discussions, and I would like to thank you, Emmanuel, for giving this opportunity, allowing our teams to be able to continue working here for 2 days. And I'd like to thank the American representatives for contributing to it. When it comes to security, the architecture already exists, and our partners can pressure Russia to put an end to this war. Ukraine never stood and never prevented peace. Russia started this aggression, and it is very clear as to who should do what is necessary to be done to put an end to this war. So I would like to thank all of those who contribute to peace. We all understand that we need to stop the aggressor to allow peace. The deep strikes, the sanctions, our diplomacy, all of this is working. Today we also talked about our air defense. It is essential. Some leaders of the coalition of the willing mentioned it. For us, it is a daily issue. It is true that Ukraine needs missiles every day because, notwithstanding diplomacy, the Russian strikes continue. Russia is not concentrating on diplomacy. They are striking our villages or cities or infrastructure. And we discussed this issue with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and I would like to thank him deeply for his understanding and his support. In Paris, the extension of air defense has been discussed already again. The stronger our air defense, the stronger will be our diplomacy. So thank you to all of you for your support. Thank you.
Chancellor Friedrich, over to you. Thank you, Emmanuel. Ladies and gentlemen, this new year is beginning exactly the way the old one ended. That's to say, with intensive peace diplomacy for Ukraine. And today's meeting of the Coalition of the Willing was a further step on this path towards peace. And so I'd like to start by thanking Emmanuel Macron for his hospitality here in Paris. And also like to thank both Emmanuel and Keir for preparing this meeting today, along with Volodymyr Zelenskiy. Because, ladies and gentlemen, today, in the triangle of Europeans, Ukraine, and United States, we have built on the progress that we achieved last year in Berlin. This is a shared success, and I'd also like to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the representatives of the United States, and thank them and President Trump for their support in all this effort. We have the same strategic goal. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the weapons in Ukraine, after 4 years of war, be finally silenced. The country is on the verge of a humanitarian energy crisis, and therefore we are stepping up, in any case, our enormous efforts so as to reach a swift conclusion. Secondly, we want there to be a ceasefire, and unlike the Minsk Agreement of 2015, one based on strong security guarantees. And thirdly, as Europeans and Ukrainians, we want to ensure that we can shape this ceasefire together. Today we focused on the contribution that Europe and its partners after a ceasefire could make for Ukraine. As Coalition of the Willing, we will be shouldering our responsibilities. We want to help to make sure that in the future there are strong armed forces in Ukraine that constitute a credible deterrent for Russia through arming, training and funding. We will also take part in the monitoring of a ceasefire, and we will also make a contribution to strengthening Ukraine on land, in the sea and in the air. With our partners in Washington, we agree for that certain conditions have to be met. Firstly, there needs to be strong legally binding security guarantees, including from the USA, and an American backstop to provide security European commitments. I'm very thankful that the United States has already said it would be willing to do so. Secondly, the ceasefire has to be organized in such a way with Russia that the Coalition of the Willing can play an active role. We are actually working towards that. And thirdly, of course, all partners in the coalition have to go through their domestic processes to decide what contribution they will make. Germany will continue to support politically, financially and militarily. That could mean, for example, that after a ceasefire for the Ukraine in a neighboring NATO area, we would have a presence. As for the type and scope of a German contribution, obviously that has to be decided by the German government and parliament once these conditions have been specified and clarified. For me and for the German government, I would say that for the moment, nothing is excluded. As of now, in the 4th year of the war, Germany is Kiev's strongest supporter. And after a ceasefire, Germany will accept responsibility for the security of Ukraine and for the continent as a whole. We also discussed today how after a ceasefire we could promote the reconstruction of Ukraine. We are working on a package for that among European partners in close coordination with the USA. The President of the Commission today explained today how the Commission could contribute to that. And this reconstruction is indissociable from the question of security guarantees. Economic strength will be an indispensable guarantee for ensuring that in the future Ukraine can present a credible deterrent to Russia. So, dear Volodymyr, this also means certain expectations of Ukraine, as we've discussed in Brussels. Ukraine must make sure that its young men can find decent jobs in their own country rather than traveling to Germany, Poland or France. This is something that we have already discussed in Brussels together, and I think that this is an expectation that Ukraine can meet and will meet. So, ladies and gentlemen, no one can say today whether the arms will be silenced in Ukraine in 6 weeks or in 6 months, but we are working tirelessly towards that peace. We'll obviously have to make compromises. We will probably not be able to achieve the ideal of a perfectly designed peace, not as much as we would like, but we have to learn not from books, but from the existing geopolitical circumstances going forward in the next 3 months. We will go about this with perseverance, realism, and a clear view of what is best for Europe. That's to say, a stable ceasefire, strong security guarantees, and peace in Europe, linking Ukrainians and Europeans that we form together. So once again, thank you for this excellent meeting today. It really was worth coming together in such great numbers. Never happened before in the coalition of the willing. We've never had so many people in one room as we had today in Paris, and that shows clearly to Russia that they have to stop the war. There's no point continuing it, and as coalition of the willing, we are willing to work with Ukraine and the US to find a way through to permanent or stable peace in Europe. So all the best for Ukraine. Thank you very much. Questions. We'll take questions now. Go ahead. Good evening. Claire Gatinois from Le Monde. Good evening, presidents, prime ministers, heads of state government and special envoys. President Macron, this is the 15th time, as you said, that the coalition of the willing has come together to produce security guarantees for Ukraine, hoping for the support of the United States. And now Trump has not firmly committed to American support. After what happened in Venezuela and the threats to Greenland sovereignty, can Europeans still trust our American ally? Don't you think we should think of security guarantees without the United States? And regarding Greenland, in the light of what was said this morning, should we consider deploying European troops to protect that territory and to protect this? Is it because you want to protect links with the United States you haven't condemned the intervention in Venezuela? Thank you. That multiple question, and I wish you a Happy New Year. On the question of Venezuela, which I think is not really connected with today's matters, diplomacy has its own roots and ways. French diplomacy has already expressed itself. We have to see that as a coherent message. I think I've been very clear about that. Regarding today's matters, the presence of President Trump's special envoys today and the commitments by President Trump himself, in particular what he said at the meeting in Mar-a-Lago at the end of last year with President Zelenskyy, that was about an American commitment to take responsibility. This meeting, I think,